What do you think actually makes a digital campaign impactful in B2B?
If I'm building robots for a manufacturing plant, I don't think a strong digital campaign that's broad is relevant because I've got a limited targeted audience. Part of the digital campaign is also doing the right analysis to know where is your audience and analyzing the market, doing gap analysis, surveys, and SWOT analysis in terms of your competitors to say, okay, you know what? These guys have more share of voice. What channels are they in? More people are talking about them from a social perspective. There's always somebody out there that's smarter and using the tools better. So you actually have to be really, really up to date in what tools are available and how you can apply them to your campaigns.
Today on Marketing Growth Fuel, we're joined by Arthur Bailey, Chief of Staff at Mimik and ex-Marketing Director for EMEA and LATAM at Amazon Web Services. A global marketing leader across EMEA and LATAM and the US, Arthur brings deep expertise in communications, analyst relations, and B2B storytelling, shaping strategies that turn reputation into measurable growth. Let's get started.
Welcome back to Marketing Growth Fuel, the podcast where we go beyond funnels and frameworks to uncover the people and purpose behind great marketing. Welcome to the show, Arthur.
Thank you for having me, Vikram.
Arthur, marketing today isn't just about the channels or the creativity, right? It's about adapting to a world where I think buyers are global, they are skeptical, they are digitally empowered. In fact, now AI empowered. So I want to kind of start off with the big picture, right? So, today I think enterprise buyers use more than 10 interaction channels, which kind of really are forcing enterprises to look at a truly omni-channel orchestration. Now you've worked across regions like EMEA, LATAM, and US. What, in your opinion, are some of the biggest shifts that you've seen in how global marketing strategies are shaping?
Well, I think as you realize global marketing has definitely gone all in on digital. And so digital interactions and digital connections with potential customers and existing customers is critical to the development of long-term connection with your customer, both from a just reputation perspective, but also from a purchasing perspective. That being said, depending on the region, there are nuances in regards to interaction. So whether it's an event or whether it's a more personalized event or a big trade show, depending on the region, those interactions directly with the customer also matter, and they specifically matter in certain regions as you go further down the pipeline. So a good percentage of time is spent around cultivating the customer from a digital perspective, whether it be through video, whether it be through radio, whether it be through digital marketing campaigns and activities, but it still becomes critical in terms of the human interaction for customers, particularly when you're talking about enterprise buying. Very different from the SMB perspective where it's, it's 99 cents or it's $2, try a click, I'll try it. But you're not doing that with, purchasing database systems or purchasing security systems. So it's much more hands-on, once you've gotten customers to a certain degree of the pipeline, it's much more of a hands-on experience.
And is there any specific region you think stands out, in terms of the influences it's had on global marketing trends?
Well, I think, I would say Europe and the US are pretty much aligned in terms of global marketing trends from a networking and communications perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The tools are relatively the same. I think the big changes are pinpointing the audience and knowing who you're going after and who's looking at your material. There are so many new tools out there that can tell you where customers came from your website, even which department, down to the department based on their location and their IP address. So being able to target customers is improved, but in the end, you still have to have the right message. And then there are the opportunities to go, as you know, it happens quite often, and particularly in the consumer side, of going viral, you know,
Hmm.
just having the right moment that gets picked up, and suddenly you're getting more attention than you have ever planned for, and you have to be able to respond to that. So I think that's the other side of this, and coming from cloud, is being able to scale those responses and scale being able to give feedback, whether it's digitally or directly through your, you know, pre-sales team, once you've gotten that customer's attention.
So it's just not regions, right? It's like you said, it's the tools, that will also,
Correct.
yeah. But from a buyer's perspective, don't you think that buyers are now choosing whom they want to listen to, and when it comes to enterprise marketing, analysts have the say.
Yeah, I would say, you know, buyers are, I wouldn't say they're the same, because buyers, particularly from a technology perspective, and that's my background, we used to very much focus on the CIO and the CTO. It's like, okay, well, they control the tech, we should talk to them. That's no longer the case in the AI market. It's all about capturing the head of HR, the head of marketing.
Hmm.
Um, you're talking to a broader audience, and the big challenge for some companies is up leveling their messaging to something I want to hear. Like, you know, talk about my business challenges. Don't be 3 slides in and talking about your technology's capabilities. I think it's very important from a marketing perspective that we focus on what problems are we solving, or what opportunities are we opening, and then how the technology does that becomes the follow up.
Hmm.
Too many companies start with, oh, well, our technology does this and does that, but you're not listening to the customer in terms of what the customer's needs are. So part of the marketing process needs to be trying to better understand what the customer's needs are. Now, analysts play very different roles depending on the types of analysts you have. You have the influencer analysts, who are really out in front in terms of new technologies and what the possibilities are.
Hmm.
And engaging with them is very much about market attention,
Hmm.
because they have very, very strong followings, similar to consumer influencers,
Yeah.
but very, very strong followings based on their expertise in technology. When you're talking about more established technologies, then the bigger firms have more influence from a sales perspective, because customers are saying, hey, who did this particular company, whether it's Gartner or Forrester IDC, who did they shortlist? And
Hmm.
if you're on their short list now, I'll talk to you. If you're not on the short list, then you know it's going to be much harder for your sales teams to
Hmm.
get their attention.
And how do you think marketers should think about integrating, analyst relations or analyst marketing into their storytelling?
Well, I think there's a couple of things in terms of what marketers need to do in terms of their storytelling. One is how analyst relations gets used in marketing.
Hmm.
Traditionally, analyst relations would be, okay, we get a report, we get our placement dot, we're a leader, we're a follower, we're a challenger,
Hmm.
and that was it. You hand it off to marketing, and you didn't do anything else with it. Now it's very much that you're integrated with marketing in terms of activating those assets.
Hmm.
So how do those assets fit into the pipeline, fit into your campaigns going forward? You know, it may be, some people like to gate their comms, particularly analyst reports, and say,
Hmm.
hey, well, give me your details in order to for me to talk to you in more detail or share this report. Where others, the non-gated approach is sort of get your interest,
Hmm.
let you see where we're standing in this space, and then reach out in other campaigns to sort of capture your data. So there's a two-step approach depending on the company. Most of the larger companies are moving towards non-gated, where smaller tech firms are still gated because they think I really, really need to fill this pipeline, versus
Right.
I don't necessarily have the tools for who's listening to me. So I've got to get you to give me your email so I can
Hmm.
start from there.
So obviously, we've touched upon, how analysts can shape perception and how can marketing leverage that, in a way. But I think the next challenge that logically flows is that perception that has been built, by marketing, by analyst relations, has to translate in some sort of a performance, and that performance could be, like you said, today's pipeline, or could be tomorrow's demand as well, right? So, which kind of really leads me to ask you, the way I look at it, enterprise marketing is no longer about just campaigns. It's all about building influence. So how do marketers now balance that, short term pipeline impact, all the while trying to build that long term reputation and
I
influence?
think it's a couple of things. I think traditionally, as I said, we would develop content working with analysts, get a research report, and just hand it off to marketing. It's part of the change in the marketplace and how we use analyst related content
Hmm.
nowadays is having a knowledge library, so that knowledge libraries directly connected to your CRM system so that you are better able to track how that content gets used with the customer from a sales perspective. So now when I have a report and it's in my knowledge repository, a salesperson pulls it for a sales call or sends it off to a customer, I'm actually able to track not only where my content is going, but also what necessarily revenue influence it has. So tracking where I say, hey, you know what, my content is used in $400 million worth of deals, because I can literally track where it gets used and where it gets used in the pipeline. So I think that's much more important nowadays in terms of getting the report is used to be the end all be all. And now it's all about how you utilize that report going forward. And even when it's not a report, you know, how do you utilize other digital content that's created by other firms in your marketing campaigns becomes critical. So you can license research that's not necessarily about your company, but it's about what's happening in this space and getting customer attention based on that research and that analysis, and then being able to talk about your product.
So we've talked about a little bit of strategy at the highest level. We've talked about global shifts. We've talked about analyst influence. But like you said, it's about how you utilize all of this, and you communicate to your prospect or your customer. And I think everything starts with digital first, and that's something that you touched
Mhm.
upon in the first segment that we talked about. Sometimes this whole digital first is almost considered to be a cliche in marketing now. But in your opinion, what do you think actually makes a digital campaign impactful in B2B?
Well, I think it actually depends on the size of the company in B2B, and particularly whether or not you're in a particular segment. I don't necessarily think a digital campaign, if I'm, for example, building robots for a manufacturing plant, I don't think a strong digital campaign that's broad is relevant, because I've got a limited target audience. So many people have manufacturing facilities that are going to be using robots. So I think part of a digital campaign is making sure that it's targeted, and that the resources are targeting the audience you want to have. Depends. It always depends on the product that you're selling, how broad your digital campaign needs to be, but part of the digital campaign is also doing the right analysis to know where is your audience, and analyzing the market. So, okay, who's reading what are they reading, doing gap analysis and doing surveys and doing SWOT analysis in terms of your competitors to say, okay, you know what, these guys have more share of voice, what channels are they in, more people are talking about them from a social perspective. I think the one thing with digital is you have access to a lot of analytics nowadays in terms of just what's being said in the market. There's the capability nowadays. I've known people to go to LinkedIn and using AI and saying, okay, what's the topic being talked about? I'll write a blog about that, and then getting a large following. So part of the digital challenge is, okay, there's always somebody out there that's smarter and using the tools better. So you actually have to be really, really up to date in what tools are available and how you can apply them to your campaigns.
And I want to double click on the whole analysis piece, right? Because at the end of the day, you would want to measure success in terms of some outcomes, some
Yes.
metrics. What should be one looking at?
Well, I think there are two different approaches in terms of, am I trying to build brand awareness, or am I working for a company? People know who we are, and I'm more focused on the new product or the new, even the old product, the new capabilities. Cars are a perfect example. Cars, it's the same car, but it's slightly changed every year. And my approach may be slightly different in terms of, okay, last year I was trying to sell you on emotionally on the being outdoors and escaping and wanting to drive to the store to get milk. Where this year, I'm not selling as much, for example, to the guys, and I need to get more of a female audience. So how do I change my marketing to appeal to appeal to you? It varies between consumer and B2B. In the B2B space, it's always got to be about, okay, I've got an issue that you're going to help me solve for, or I've got a market position that I need to increase, and how you're going to help me be more productive or get more visibility. So the B2B is very different from the B2C. And in the B2B space, you've really, really, really got to know your audience better. I think that's why a lot of companies tend to have specialized salespeople or specialized marketing people for the various verticals. You know, if I'm a marketing expert in healthcare, it doesn't mean I'm a great marketing expert in manufacturing
Hmm.
or in public sector. So having an understanding of those particular verticals and how they buy and what their interest areas are is critical to building the right campaigns.
But would you look at some sort of metrics? Let's say you're saying share of voice could be. I don't know. I'm just trying to understand what are the KPIs that you would want to measure.
To a certain degree, share of voice is critical in terms of how am I doing compared to my competitors.
Hmm.
But then certain companies don't deal with what the competitors are doing. It's like, how am I doing just in terms of this is the audience and are they listening to me? Are they talking about me? Where are they communicating?
Hmm.
Part of the campaigns I've done previously is going to review sites.
Hmm.
And it's one thing to say, oh, you know, people are listening to me, they're seeing my ads, I'm getting 1,000 views, but
Hmm.
do they really like my product?
Hmm.
And so going to review sites and actually analyzing what people are saying about your products and how they're using it and what the issues are, and then taking that feedback and bringing it back into your campaign. If they're very happy about a particular thing, maybe I should
Hmm.
be emphasizing that thing. If they're unhappy about a particular thing, maybe I should be talking about how we've improved and changed that. So I think audience listening becomes critical in terms of the campaign and the approach, and
Hmm.
then being able to measure that, okay,
Hmm.
that message has changed. Their perception, because share of voice is just, okay, I'm getting more stories than you, but the perception matters as well. So I'm measuring market perception, but I'm not just measuring it from the customer perspective. I'm also measuring it from the analyst perspective. What are the analysts saying about me, and what is their perception of my brand? Most of the
Hmm.
time when I engage with analysts, or my team does, it's all about, whether it's an event or an activity, there's always a post-event survey. You know,
Hmm.
did I change your mind? Would you recommend my product or my service to your
Hmm.
customer as a result of this conversation?
What I'm understanding is that this whole the perception, the communication, they are just marketing outputs. They're in many ways responsibilities of marketers now, and in many ways that's exactly where I want to move ahead, right? So
Mhm.
because the role of marketing leaders is evolving at a rapid pace, right? So you are expected to be a diplomat, you're expected to be a strategist, you're expected to be a generative AI expert. They expect you to have fluency in tech and in also team leadership. With that backdrop in mind, love to understand what, in your opinion, are the skills that are going to be the most critical for marketers in the next decade.
It doesn't say it in marketing, but it does say it in public relations and analyst relations. It's relations. You know, if you're not good at relations, it's going to be very, very challenging to be a marketeer. It doesn't mean you can't be a marketeer and be introverted and be, you know, much more into the data, but you do need to be able to communicate. You do need to be able to know how to listen. I think the biggest challenge sometimes for some people is, okay, I'm telling you how great we are, but you're not listening to my problems. You're not listening to what I'm saying. And
Hmm.
so marketing campaigns need to be able to listen as much as they talk. So if I post, for example, I post a marketing campaign on LinkedIn, great, people are looking at the video, but what are the comments? What are they saying about, you know, my company? You know, are they responding to the ad, or are they responding to other issues they've had with my company? And this is an opportunity for them to vent. Um, I can't say there's a one size fits all marketing approach these days,
Hmm.
because social media as well as AI has changed quite a bit. You know,
Right.
I can now type in, you know, what do they think about me in this country? And it may be hallucinating to a certain degree, but there's a lot of information, a lot of data out there in terms of AI being able to use to get more market intelligence.
Hmm.
But the one thing I find also is very important, it varies by market how you need to engage. I'll give you an example. I can be doing a marketing campaign in the US and never touch the customer directly. It's all digital. They've
Hmm.
all engaged with digital in the pipeline. I can't do that same thing in the GCC in the Gulf region. Yes, they may have seen my ad, but if I don't engage with the customer, if I'm not there physically meeting
Hmm.
with the customer and I'm trying to sell at a distance, it doesn't work. Same thing in Europe. You know, you can't, not all countries, digital is the only way to go. You have to have some sort of physical interaction. You have to have some sort of relationship building.
Hmm.
Quite a few cultures, it's like, I'm not going to buy from you if I don't know you. And it's not me, I have to know you personally, but I have to have engaged with you
Right.
versus you just tell me great things about your product and I talk to a few friends and I buy. That's just not culturally how things work. So you have to be able to, I've worked for various companies. I've worked for Korean companies, I've worked for American, I've worked for European. You really, really have to have your marketing campaigns aligned to the culture you're trying to sell to.
So what I'm hearing is that building that relationship is going to be the most important skill set moving ahead, right? Whether it's you're a front-facing marketer or you're a data-driven introverted marketer. But in the world that we are living right now, somehow everybody is focusing on the vanity metrics. I mean, skill is one part, but what you're choosing to measure is also becoming difficult, right? So how do you think, or how would you encourage the younger marketers today to think beyond these vanity metrics and focus on real business outcomes? Because I think that's what the demand of the boardrooms are today.
Well, I can tell you, my personal experience. I've worked for various companies, and some companies we've had major crisis in terms of brand was great, and then there was a crisis in regards to our position in the marketplace.
Hmm.
And the biggest challenge was, okay, well, how do I come back? Do I just, bring out my next product and ignore what the issue was with my last product? Do I, try to talk to the audience directly and explain, well, things are differently now? It's critical that you always have a pulse of what your audience is thinking about you and that you can use influencers to change that pulse. So when I did have an issue one time, I went back to market, not talking to the media, not doing advertising campaigns, but actually talking to analysts and getting analyst opinions in terms of, okay, what are your thoughts? Come in, see how we're doing things differently, and leading, going back to
Hmm.
market when I introduced the product, leading with analyst commentary and research before I did the press interview. So, starting my, your, as you call your hero stories, you'd
Hmm.
normally give an exclusive to some newspaper. It's like, well, you know what? They, they're going to be much more interested in smell blood in the water. No matter what I say, they're going to want to cover it in a certain way
Yeah.
versus working with an analyst who's going to be much more neutral and say, okay, I'm not going to shill for your product, but I'm going to talk about what you did differently and help me shape the story to the audience. So I think it becomes critical in terms of depending on where you stand in the marketplace
Hmm.
that you constantly use the broader audience. You've got, I mean, there's reasons why tech companies have what they call communities,
Hmm.
and
True,
basically they're
true.
fans, right?
Absolutely.
And you bring out those fans, you bring out those ambassadors for a reason because they believe in the brand and they will tell you the truth when things aren't working.
Hmm.
But they have the pulse of the audience that you're trying to reach. So
Hmm.
it's critical that you're engaging with those. Unfortunately, sometimes with larger companies, they're so big that the people who are managing the ambassadors aren't connected to the people who are managing the marketing campaigns, aren't connected to the people who are building the new product features and
Right.
capabilities.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest challenge with larger firms is you don't necessarily talk to each other as frequently because of your size. I mean, because it's success that have gotten you that way. The one thing I'm finding in this transition is going to be for me is like, look, I'm going to be sitting with the engineers. So I'm
Hmm.
going to be talking about the product and the capabilities as opposed to reading a research report or reading something internally
Right.
that tells me, but I've never actually touched it because that's in another division in another country even.
And where do you think in all of this, this whole new genre of B2B influencers fits in?
It's a hard
And
one. It's a hard one because
and what's your take on B2B influencers? I mean, we've obviously seen a lot of this happen on the consumer side, where you have
yes.
influencers being able to purchase decisions, and maybe these decisions are much smaller in nature. The deal
Mhm.
size are the value is much lesser. But how does this fit in this whole enterprise marketing space?
I think B2B influencers, they have a place in the sort of sales pipeline. And to a great degree, it's about the attention.
Hmm.
It's about, if you think about CES as an example, the Consumer Electronics Show takes place every year. There are thousands of products. It went from a consumer electronics show to a car show to, they've added so many new things every year.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
matters. There's a lot of noise. It matters in
Right.
terms of those influencers who are coming to your booth and giving you that coverage
Hmm.
and giving you that, sort of insights like, oh, that's interesting because not everybody goes to the show.
Hmm.
And so having them cover you it makes a difference. It helps in terms of attention. Now, it's not going to put those people in the pipeline, but it is going to put perception. It is going to influence. Oh yeah, are they talking about me after they went? This guy said this and that about the booth, or said this and that about the product. It is likely that they are, and then you have to do your due diligence in terms of, okay, now what campaign am I going to drive behind that? There's also the B2B influencers that have nothing to do with your product area, and yet they're covering it anyway because they're just got 10 million followers. I'm not necessarily a big fan of that, because I personally think it's disingenuous to the customer. It's like, why are you reviewing cars and you're covering, you typically cover drones, right?
Absolutely.
What makes you an expert in this space?
Right.
For consumer, that may work, but for B2B, I don't think it's long lasting.
No, in fact, because I've been following this conversation on Reddit and also on LinkedIn, where there's a lot of push for influencers to be able to sell, or influence decisions in enterprise buying environments. I mean, I still understand in the context of someone like an Adobe, trying to push through their products through influencers who are creative, and maybe the end user is that single person who will be able to drive the change. I don't know how that will still fit in the context of, say, maybe a bigger, purchase, maybe an AWS cloud subscription for the entire business.
It depends on, and to be honest, it depends on the product. If I am selling mining truck tires, no matter what B2B influencer, it's not going to influence the
Correct.
buyer there. Versus I am selling an IT product that has both B2C and B2B implications. I can, for example, you gave Adobe, I can do a commercial about a kid's creativity and connect that to the creativity of creating, beautiful products. Correct. Using Adobe or using some other product. I can't do that with a truck tire. I can't do that with a huge dump truck that I'm trying to sell to mine. So there are certain product areas where B2B influencers can help, and there's certain where you're pretty much just wasting your time.
Great conversation so far, Arthur. And we're almost on time. And before we wrap up, we'd love to shift gears for a moment. We've talked about, obviously, the shifts. We've talked about the funnels. We've talked about loops. But it's only fair that I test your reflexes a bit. We're going to do a lightning round that we call the this or that marketing mashup. I'm going to give you two choices. You just need to pick one. Okay. Let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Global reach or local impact?
Global reach.
Analyst insight or customer voice?
Customer voice.
Global strategy or regional adaptation?
Regional adaptation.
Brand awareness or lead generation?
Lead generation.
Okay. Case studies or white papers?
Case studies.
Customer advocacy or partner advocacy?
Partner advocacy.
Perception building or revenue impact?
Perception building.
Thought leadership or demand capture?
Thought leadership.
And the last one, innovation messaging or reliability messaging?
Innovation.
All right, so that was a fun way to see where you stand on some of the biggest marketing debates today. Thank you, Arthur. Not just for sharing your global perspectives, but also practical lessons, and also that quick fire insights for our audience, which we can take back to their teams. This wraps up another episode of Marketing Growth Fuel. A big thank you to you once again, Arthur, for your time. To our listeners, don't forget to subscribe, share, and join us the next time as we continue exploring the people and the ideas shaping the future of marketing. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.